Hello again, everybody. Um, got the good old bedhead going again. I know you guys like it. hmm Um, Last time I was talking about, Genesis and the Bible, and I talked a lot about the Noah story, the flood story of that, and a lot of the evidence that. I guess I want to kind of explain also that when you do research, and it's almost like the cops when they are trying to figure out exactly what happened, or investigators, crime scene investigators. There's a story there. You're looking at the evidence. You're getting everybody's story. The story of Genesis is not only in the Bible. It's everywhere. India has their version. There's a lot of flood stories. Almost every civilization has a flood story. Every one of them, and they talk about it in different ways. Some of it's symbolic, some of it is, very, uh, I don't want to say factual, but it's kind of literal. And then some of it's symbolic too. And a lot of people want to take the Bible Genesis version literally, and you can't do that. There's a lot of symbolic stuff going on in there, like the serpent. The Garden of Eden was less of a garden than just Eden. It was an area in southern Iraq. They found it, and it's not what it used to be because of the flood. And yeah, when the flood happened, it moved a lot of mud. It buried a lot of things. It buried a lot of cities. It buried a lot of the gold mines that is. And I don't know if I told you all this, but like this, I heard my aunt talk about Zachariah Sitchin, and his theory about how there's another planet out there, and it comes through our solar system every so often, and they were looking for gold, and they're the ones that. And I never paid much attention to it. I was just a little kid back then. But then I I was very curious about all the archaeology that was going on, and you see these archaeologists and these historians going around and trying to find evidence to prove the Bible stories, and find evidence so that they could, prove that their book was 100% factual and real, and it was a book of history. Well, there is a lot of that happening. The problem is they're not telling you the parts that dispute their story, and that's not good science. Good science is finding all the evidence you can to prove you're wrong. And if you can't find evidence that you're wrong, then you can start to assume that maybe you're on the right path and that your theory is correct, or the story's correct. Um, I also watched a lot of Ancient Aliens, and it was interesting, but there was still something about it that was just not. Something wasn't sitting right with me, especially that goofy haired guy. What's his name? Johnny. Goofy, anyways. He comes up with some pretty wild stories and theories about what he thinks happened. Well, I don't know if they've read anything more than Daniken's Chariots of Fire, or Zachariah Sitchin's book, The 12th Planet, which is kind of a funny story too, because he was never talking about a 12th planet. He was talking about a ninth planet. He was talking about the 12th major entity in the solar system, and he included the moon as one. And there's actually, I think there's 9 planets in our system right now, but they call 2 of them dwarfs. That's why they took Pluto off, because it was so small. They're like, nah, it's not a planet. It's a possible moon. What's funny is there was evidence that Pluto was inside it was closer to the sun at one point. And Zecharia Sitchin's book, he talks about the planet, and this planet was called Nibiru, or he called it Planet X or something like that. But it was on a path coming through our solar system and got caught by our sun. And they believe that it is a brown dwarf more than a planet. But these people are living on it. And I'm like, okay, that's kind of weird too, but okay. Maybe that's how they stay warm, because it is got its own, it's got so much energy of its own that it stays warm. And maybe they're trying to stay cool, I don't know. But it came through, and Earth wasn't even a planet yet. There was another planet they called it Tiamat, and they had different names for all of our planets. Lamu, I think, was Mars, and Mars had, at that time, was actually the third planet, and this Tiamat was the fourth planet, and then it was Jupiter. And so their planet comes through the solar system, and it's not perfectly clear on whether their planet actually collided with this other planet, or if one of their moons smashed into it and destroyed it. Well, the biggest part flew off with one of the moons and became Earth. And there's a lot of scientists for a while now that have said they theorize that this happened because the Earth and the moon do not make sense. The moon is, they've said, too big for our planet to capture out of just nowhere. So something had to have happened where they were created together and they coalesced together, and there's the collision theory. So I'm like, okay, well, maybe there's something to this. The problem is this planet goes around the opposite direction because it was coming in a direction and it got captured, so it's going around the opposite way the rest of the planets are going. And it got caught, and now it's in an elliptical orbit because of the way it got captured by our sun. And it's kind of like, okay, this thing just came out of nowhere. Well, now there's evidence that our galaxy is actually cannibalizing another smaller galaxy as we speak. And like, this has been happening for a long time, millions of years. So there's a little bit of chaos going on in our solar system. The scary part is if this is true, this planet could be gone within 3,000 and some years if this other planet comes through again and disrupts things. Now, I told you the story about the flood story, and it's not perfectly clear on whether this entity, Enlil, created the flood or if it happened because their planet was passing by. And a lot of people have said, well, you're going to tell me that these aliens just come from outer space, from some planet, from some place that ain't even in our solar system, and they just drove here. And no, their planet passes by, and they can just hop, skip, and jump over, just like we do to Mars. And who knows how close it gets. But we've done this with satellites. Why can't we do it with? Why can't they do it? And they're more intelligent than we are, and they're more advanced than we are. And I know a lot of people say, well, if they're so advanced, why can't they just, get their own gold, and why can't they get it from the asteroids? I don't know if you remember that part in Star Wars where C-3PO and they were going to, what was that planet that got destroyed, and there was nothing but that meteors, whatever. And he says, but sir, do you know how did you say it? But sir, do you know the odds of successfully navigating an asteroid field? Never tell me the odds. Nobody's. And their stories actually talk about going through the asteroid belt when the first one came to Earth. And I thought it was an interesting story. But this is what's crazy to me, is that story that when he was coming to Earth, he described every planet in detail and what they were like, their size, their color. Is it Neptune? I think it's Neptune. It is on a side spin, and they also said that that's because their planet disrupted that, and so this is a brown dwarf planet, and it must have enough weight and gravity that is disrupting our planets. So Pluto got kicked out to the outer rim, and Neptune got flipped on its side. And then they were talking about when they were here, they were digging up gold, that when the Great Flood happened, that's also the same time when Mars lost its atmosphere. Their planet did something and caused a disruption with that, and the atmosphere went away, and then the water evaporated because they were stopping there, and they were getting fuel too. They were using the fuel from the water on Mars for their spaceships. Interesting story too. But I gotta keep track where I'm at. Sometimes I get distracted by my thoughts. So this planet supposedly is now on a 3,600 year path, and they call it a Shar. And yeah, that's crazy. So you can live on a dwarf sun, a brown dwarf, apparently. It's starting to, I don't know, it's weird to me, but okay. We'll go with it. It's an interesting story, but the stories that are really interesting is the things that happened on Earth, and it's hard, like I was saying, I got into this only because of one guy, and he was talking about, he was on Google Earth because he read the stories of the Anunnaki, and he's like, you know what, well, there's got to be evidence of this, right? Then, I mean, if this story is true, let's find out. Let's see if there's any evidence to corroborate this. So he started doing Google Earth, and he was looking, and there was a story about the Abzu, and it was meant the land below, and people were assuming it's just South African area, below the equator. So he is looking on Google Earth, and he's seeing all these structures all over the place in these lines, and he goes down, he investigates, and he's like, okay, there's some crazy stuff going on here. There's circles, and when they moved these, there were circles, and it was just gosh dang it, very odd stones, and they weren't like perfect circles. They weren't, and they had like little circles inside the big circle, and he said it was really weird. He'd get inside one, and his GPS wouldn't work. So I'm running out of time. So they were moving some of these stones, and they were ringing like bells. And then they did some energy work. They were finding out that the temperature inside the stones was more than the outside the stones. And then they started doing frequency, and there's a huge amount of frequency and energy coming out of these. And that kind of got me interested. And he said there's all these gold mines around all these structures. So there was a lot of gold mining going on down there, and that was the beginning of it. And with that, I will end it here and go on to the next one.